Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. This is Michael. I'm Sascha. Welcome, Michael. And do you know what we talk about today?
I have no idea. You decided not to tell me until now.
It's different.
So I noticed a tree behind me. You see all those big branches going out from my head. They're my thoughts. So you can tell I'm thinking about it.
Actually, the background you chose fits beautifully with the topic of today, which is aging.
Ah, well, how about that?
And I told you were going to like it.
Yeah, I quite like that.
Yeah. So first off, I mean, obviously you're much older than me. What's your take?
Obviously, I mean, you've got a beard, I've got a beard. You've got no hair, I got no hair. Yeah,
no, it's just I'm just telling by the maturity that you radiate.
Yeah, right.
What's your take on aging?
I'm just going to say, I'll open up for about 5 minutes of it. I think aging is, let's put it this way. When I was 15, I was having my leg stitched up. I'd gashed it open. And when I was 10, I nearly died from, very nearly died apparently, from a major sunburn and sunstroke. And then my body, to stay alive, manifested. I remember at one time I had 17 carbuncles. And I'm not exaggerating, that is a cluster of boils. And so like that on my hand, you see what I've got? A cluster of boils would come up as big as that. And they're called carbuncles. And I had 17 on my body at one stage. In fact, without them, I would have died. Anyway, that's beside the point. And so I'm 15, 5 years later, and I'm being stitched, my gashed leg, by our lovely Dr. Robson. We had family doctors then. And as he stitched them up, he said, well, he said, now you should live to a great age. And he said, you have everything you need for longevity. Well, I had just left school, but we hadn't done longevity. So I wasn't even sure what the word meant. And so I said, well, how will that happen then? Because that was a cunning way to get him to tell me. He said, well, he said, you've got a long neck and short legs. He said, that makes it perfect for the heart to pump blood around the body in the most efficient way, so you will live a long time. And at that moment, something clicked in me, and I thought, okay, I'm going to live to be a very old man. And then through the years, that sort of faded out for a while, but then when I started on my spiritual path, I began to think about this again, and I thought, okay, I'm going to live to be elderly, I'm going to be an elder, and so I will look after my health. And so then I began the journey toward nutrition and researching what is good, what isn't good. And then in the whole process of that, my relationship with myself changed, grew and changed into a loving, kind and honoring relationship. And as I look back now, you know, I've done research on the elderly, and they found that most people who go beyond a century, centenarians, and then if you go beyond 110, you're a super centenarian. And so they find that most of these people have three things in common. One, they have no worries and anxieties. Two, they live basically simple lives. And three, they don't eat very much. They eat just enough for what they need, but they've let go of they've lost the need to eat because that tastes nice. And so I'll eat twice as much as I need. That's three things they found they have in common. And when I was been in Japan, I've been going there for 18 years. In Japan, I think they have, of all countries, they have more centenarians than any country in the world. They're up to about 50,000, I think it was, centenarians. Of course, they're losing that because they're becoming more and more westernized. And when you see McDonald's in Tokyo, you feel for them because they're well on their way to being as stupid as we Westerners are regarding food. But the elders, I think many of them live out in the country and they live simple, quiet lives. The family respect them and honor them, where in the Western world, chuck them into an old folks' home and never go and see them again. And that's not an exaggeration because about 70% in Australia are never visited, which I find incredible. Not Christmas, not birthdays, not Father's or Mother's Day. They just leave them until they die. And so they're honored and respected still. And they are all like little sparrows in build. They all look like a good wind will blow them away. And I've met quite a few of them. And although I couldn't say I'd spoken with them, I've sort of met them and nodded to them and smiled at them, some of them. And they all seem to fit into that category that seems to be globally the way that it goes with age. None of them are heavy, overweight people, which doesn't bode well for our Western society.
Right. And since you were just talking about Japan, I have the list of the places where we have the longest living people on Earth. And Okinawa, Japan is one of them. The other four are Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Loma Linda, California, and Ikaria, Greece. So it seems quite random.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, seems quite random to me. I mean, some village in Greece, some village in California, some village in Costa Rica. But what they found out in this study was that on average, these people were, when it comes to nutrition, they were, like you said, they were only eating very little amount of calories. And also they were in general having an average of 120 greens in their diet over the year, spread out, which most Western diets, they just have like 5 or 10 greens, different greens spread out.
Yeah, and also I think the quality of the food is, has been, because only more recent years that we've gone into the chemical abuse of what we call food, growing food. Up till, my father's generation, it was all organic because there was nothing else.
All right. Yeah, but
now, I have to say that it did start in his lifetime because it really became really bad for a while. But anyway, systemic sprays go into the system of the plant. That's what it means, systemic. So it goes right through. So when you get oranges today, like many of the commercial orchards in America, they spray them 50 times from flowering until they eventually pick the fruit, 50 times.
Wow,
and
that's
people
amazing.
throw the skin away and think that's dealt with. Well, I'm sorry, but it's systemic sprays, most of them. And that doesn't help you in the process of aging. So I think in aging today, we definitely would have to look in our Western society, away from the isolated villages and that. I think you'll definitely have to be looking for very good quality food. But to me, in the end, it's all about consciousness.
Yeah, so let's talk about the metaphysical aspect of all of this.
I'm just going to shut the windows, a cold
Sure.
draft suddenly coming in. So yes.
So yeah, I was just going to say that for me personally, to be honest, I don't really care too much whether I get old or not. I have a feeling of trust that I will leave this body whenever the time has come. That's my feeling. When everything is done that I need to do, then it's time to go. So I have never really been into, necessarily needing to become old or whatever. So I was wondering, what's your take on, is it desirable to become old, or would you rather agree with me that that's a good position to take, or what's your take on it?
I absolutely agree with your position. As I look back now, when I was 15, I think that moment was absolutely intended. It was absolutely intended that I should suddenly become aware that I could live to a great age, and it stayed with me all my life. I mean, it's just a remark, and yet it stayed with me all my life. And so I think that was absolutely deliberate and intended. And otherwise, my attitude would be absolutely yours. I mean, the first healthy aspect is no fear of death. As soon as you've got a fear of death, then fear and death will approach each other, whereas you have no fear of death. Death is sort of a bit disillusioned with you. Okay, well, if I can't frighten you, I'll go and there's plenty of other people I can frighten. I'll go and visit them, and I won't come to you until you're ready to drop your mortal coil, as it were. And so I think that's an absolutely perfect attitude. And I could sort of say I didn't deliberately adopt this attitude. The attitude I had grew with me. And eventually I thought, well, okay, if all animals, like a squirrel or a monkey, can live 7 times the development of his physical body, and for us that would be 140 years, maybe I would like to do that, maybe I wouldn't. There are some mornings I get up and I think 140, forget it, I don't want to. Because like yesterday, like an idiot, there was a rock that probably weighed about 200 kilos, and a rock, 200 kilos in a rock is very difficult, and I moved it where I shouldn't have moved it. So today I'm walking around limping because as I moved it, my calf muscle got heavily aggravated, and so today, doing these stupid photographs, I've been limping around pretty well all day. But that's, Carolyn sort of gets a bit annoyed with me, and that is my stupidity. But on the other hand, you know, for me, the garden and the exercise in it is definitely part of my sort of, I mean, this year, I'm next year, you know, a few more months, and I'm 85 years young.
Yeah.
And and if ever you use that, it's always young, not old. Because old, I mean, when you look at it, 85 and then you, just say 80. If you take a 0 away, that's nothing. So you're 8. And today I was clowning around and somebody said, you're like an 8-year-old. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, just add 5 to it. And that makes me like, what, 13? And so I'm a kid still. So I have an irreverent, I have a respect for age. I have a great respect for it, but I don't respect the aging process the way the Western world does it. I think you know, my brother and I were having discussion online, and he and I mean, we're about the opposite end of the spectrum. He's as left as you can get, brain hemisphere. I'm about as right. I've learned to live whole brain, but he's still over in the left. And we were discussing age, and he thinks it's all due to his education. And I said, so how on earth, because he's 88 this January. So I said, how on earth do you work that out? And he said, well, because he knows how to use his brain. He said today, many universities will give you a PhD. He said, when I went to university, Cambridge, you earned your PhD. He said, so a PhD of a man of my age, he said, is far different from a PhD of today. I said, okay, well, that's ego and arrogance. So what's this got to do with aging? And he said, well, because I know how to use my brain so brilliantly, I keep my brain active. And there is truth to that. His brain is probably...
I would agree to that to an extent, because judging from that, I know those who keep their minds active and their body also, generally they age much better.
Well, his body looks as if it's shrinking up a bit now. And, you know, it's like wasting away. but his brain, I have to say, is probably as good as it was ever at his peak. And so he's inordinately proud of his age. And the thing he's got completely bald on top with this fringe, which is now hanging down to his shoulders because he won't have it cut because he could get COVID. He's done an enormous amount of research and decided that the vaccination is way, way, way too dangerous. I mean, I didn't know this. He has access to the records of the paramedics of England, of the UK, and he's read thousands of reports. How he gets them, I don't know. I do know. One of his friends is the head of, at the top of paramedics. And so he read thousands of reports. And I didn't know how many people, the hundreds of people have gone blind and paralyzed and crippled and strokes. I mean, I knew there was a lot. But he said that on the top of all that heap is Pfizer. But that's not, you know, they don't age very well, the ones who've had that.
Let's bring in another question. Is there
what I'm getting at is he's using his brain the whole time.
Yeah.
I think there's a time when you want to find the balance between using your brain, and I read prolifically. He does. I read an enormous amount, like every year, probably 100 books, because I just love it. So following your passion, following your loves, following your joy has a great deal to do with easy aging.
Is there any spiritual benefit to physical long age?
I would say so, yes. You know, I mean, what's the point? We live to about 70 when people start getting old. We should have in place our life nicely in place, business in place, income in place, everything's flowing perfectly. Then what do? We go and head over to where they keep the coffins. And it might take us a few years to get there, but we walk over to coffins. Whereas if you could live another 70 years and now focus on your spirituality with your wisdom and your patience and your steadiness and your breadth of knowledge and your intelligence, 70 years now to focus on your spiritual growth, there would be a very much more holistically and well-balanced out humanity.
I agree with you. I would argue, though, that 95% of humanity doesn't do that. And for 95% of humanity, there's no real spiritual benefit of being in their body for longer times. And it seems to me that it's only because of their attachment that they stick around, whether it's attachment to their spouse or wife or, you know, or job or house or their own body or whatever it is. But for most people, it could be zero growth after some point.
Just as you can keep a pet alive beyond its lifespan with powerful emotional attachment, and women and men with their dogs particularly doing this all the time, so you can keep your body in your body with a powerful fear, which is an emotional insecurity attachment. And I knew a woman who spent 20 years of her life helping people to die.
How does that work?
She got bowel cancer and was terrified.
How does that work, Michael? How can you, I mean, metaphysically, how do people maintain their physical body or the bodies of their pets alive while spiritually speaking, they would be long gone?
I think it is. The word attachment says it well. The word attachment, now we're not talking about holding on to a healthy body. We're talking about holding on to their bodies. So with fear, it's invariably sick, but they just hang on and hang on and hang on. And like Carolyn's mother and her mother-in-law both lived well into their sort of early to mid-90s. And neither of them had a clue about life. Both of them treated themselves and their diet and everything appallingly. And still, they hung on, and they were neither of them well. They hung on into the mid-90s. If they had had self-love, self-respect, and ate and drank in a way that honored the bodies and themselves, I think they definitely have the genetic pattern that they could have gone a long way into their hundreds. But you see, we have a society that said, wow, they did well, didn't they? They were really in their 90s. They did very well, because 100 is, okay, the maker's going to grab you. It doesn't matter how far you run. The maker's hand is coming down. He's going to get you. Like Queen Elizabeth's mother, sorry, Queen, yeah, our Queen's mother. Her mother, she was known as the Queen Mother. Well, she died at about 103. Well, the rumor had it that she was so pickled in whiskey she couldn't die. So that's another way to do it.
And there's some there seems to be some truth to that too, because I know a couple of people who, yeah, are drinking quite a bit, and they're in some weird way, alcohol seems to have conserved them.
You heard the story of the French woman, didn't you?
Which one? No.
In France, it's if somebody say they're in their 70s and they decide to sell their house, so somebody buys it and they will pay them so much a week for the house for as long as they live. So if they're 70 and they live 10 years, they pay them so much a week or so much a year. And so they may well get a great bargain. The house is really good. But the elderly person has the security of money to live on. But she sold it and she lives there until she dies, and it goes. This French woman, it's an amazing case. She was about 71 or 2, and she sold her house quite reasonably to a Frenchman. And when she was 115, he died. The family still had to keep paying her rent for the house, and she lived to be 119.
The best deal she ever made.
And she was ready to die at 119. She said quite clearly she was blind and had been blind for 2 years, but she still drank her, I think it was whiskey every day, a good glass of whiskey every day, to which clearly, and she smoked up until she was about 109. And so clearly she said, these things are good for your health. And but the thing is, genetically, she must have had quite an amazing genetic code.
Now let's talk about DNA for the last 10 minutes. Seems like the state-of-the-art research more or less says that aging has a lot to do with DNA oxidating. So what role, like metaphysically, you having looked into it, does DNA play? And yeah, and oxidation, I mean, do you think when you step into the moment, when you step into your true spiritual potential, that there are changes to DNA? I know that you said that before. And then would that maybe stop oxidation, or what do you think?
I see what you mean. I thought you're talking about, yeah, we oxidize. But, you know, I'm not really metaphysically investigating the whole oxidization process.
Oxidization.
But I do find that, for instance, if you oxygenate your blood by working out and by being vigorous physically, then the more oxygen you take in, the more that feeds the brain. And you'll never find elderly people who have mental degeneration who breathe deeply. And so the oxygenization of the body, which is different from oxidization,
so I was right. Oxidation is the right word, and oxidization is the opposite.
Is the right word. Yeah. I'm talking about oxygenization of the body. So I think that is of supreme importance. I think that people's metabolisms are different. There's no question. They vary. But I think when you get elderly, a lot of elder people tend to lose their cares and worries. They get looked after. And I think that removal of care and worry, I think takes away some of the oxidation of body. I don't know why that happens, but there is a burden removed from them that they no longer have to create an income, look after themselves and all that. But then there's another one that counters that, because when they go into homes and are cared for, there is a sense of feeling useless and unwanted and unloved. So one balances out the other. But with DNA, you can change your genetic code. If you're unconditionally loving yourself, your genetic code changes. And not only that, if you were to sire children, that code will continue into the children that you have lifted to a whole higher level. Now, my parents, I don't think, were the sort that lifted the genetic code to a higher level, but there is longevity in our family. My great uncle was walking around at 99, shaving with an open cutthroat razor on his face, walking around in the kitchen giving orders to the men because he owned a farm and a lot of horses. And so that would imply, therefore, that might move down, and one of the next children in some generation would get that. So it would seem that both my brother and I seem to have a good genetic code. But as I look at him and I look at me, his brain, I have nothing, it's amazing. But if you look at the bodies and our approach to life, they're completely different. He has been shut in the house basically for 2 years, terrified of COVID. I'm completely unconcerned about it. And so if you look at us, I probably look 10 years younger than him. Now I don't say that with any arrogance or ego. It's just simply fairly obvious. But then you see, that's my consciousness, and his age will not be due to consciousness. His age, in the end, will be a genetic code and a very, very active, a very active and complete. Every day, his brain is working busy, hard. There's no sort of retirement in his program. He's got so many projects to see through before he dies. I seriously doubt that he'll have time to die here. I don't know how long he'll go, but I suspect he might well outlive me. I don't know. Good luck with that. But I'm going pretty well. And so I think there's somehow a joy in reaching an age where you have looked at your relatives when they were your age, and you looked at cranky old men and shriveled up old men and bent over and not nice people. And you find when you reach that age, oh my gosh, I'm upright and I'm not cranky and I'm not shriveled up and I feel great. I'm still enjoying life tremendously. And there's few of the keys of passion. I have a passion for being a spiritual teacher. I love sharing my wisdom with the world, or as much of the world as chooses to listen, to listen. And I have a passion for the garden. I have a passion for reading. Thank God for Kindle, that's all I can say. And I've got about 700 in it now. And so I don't know what boredom is. And you get a lot of elderly people, they're bored and they're tired. And I think that it goes downhill when you start sleeping in bed till 9, then 10, then 11, and finally you get up by midday and you're going back again in bed by 7 because it's getting tired. And I know people younger than me are doing this. And I just sort of have a sense of amazement that and so I watch a lot of people younger than me get old and die, get Alzheimer's and die. And I realize it's an attitude. It's a relationship with life that is vital and powerful.
Now, before you make your closing remarks, maybe as to how people can influence their process of aging in a positive manner. One more thing that I need to ask, though, is we've talked about aliens, we've talked about other beings, and it seems to be quite normal, also maybe in the past of humanity and in the future of humanity, according to what we talked about. It seems to be quite normal to have a much higher age, like 300, or to be kind of ageless. That type of ageless pattern seems to be very prevalent in so many of those beings that you meet and that we've talked about. Why is that compared to our state?
I think that's quite an easy one. They've let go of their anger, their emotions are balanced, and all the stuff that goes with emotional imbalance, all the negative emotions basically are not there. I just been into 2 frequencies higher than we live in, and that was quite challenging. And I was talking with a woman named Mella, and I figured she was about 50, and I learned that she was 151, and she looked about 50. Now, I learned also that that's what she'll look until whenever she dies. You know, she won't look any older than. It will be more of a sense, okay, I'm going to move on now. I've done wonderfully here. I've learned what I need to do. There is no waiting to die. It's that they move on, because shedding the body is just irrelevant. I mean, you just shed the body. You just let it, you go to sleep and leave the body and continue on. Whereas you and I both know that most of humanity, as we're seeing evidence of in this pandemic of fear, is terrified of death. Like, my brother thinks I'm a complete lunatic because I'm not afraid of death. He just doesn't get it. And he says, well, it's because you're like you are, you're different. And I said, no, well, okay, yes, I am, but I'm different from what? He said, different from any form of normality. You know, I said to him, you know, I have to accept that. I probably am. And if difference is like not being afraid of death, you're not afraid of death. So it's not something that comes of age. It's something that comes with a relationship with yourself in life, where you truly know your immortality, your eternity. And then suddenly, what is it to fear? I mean, okay, it would be nice not to die with the death of 1,000 cuts or death of 1,000 needles, although a lot of people look like they might be heading in that direction right now. But still, we've got a long way to go. We're only on the 3rd and 4th now.
Gives this expression a whole nother dimension of meaning.
That's right. It does, doesn't it? A scary one. And that's, you know, I just said the word scary. I don't know what scared is anymore. I don't really know what fear is.
Would you say, I mean, we really need to come to a close slowly, but would you say that it's really the powerhouse of our human emotions that, because we use it in a negative way, create the aging process that we now consider normal?
I've always put it down, we think.
Okay.
And it's considered by psychologists that probably 80 to 90% of our thoughts are self-attack and negative. Then how can you, every thought, we don't realize it, but every thought has an accompanying emotion. And although they are all on a sub-level, the sub-emotions and the sub-thoughts and the sub-emotions are energetically with us, and they are hugely negative in most people. When you leave that negative pattern, then as far as I'm concerned, at this point, aging is pretty much slowed down for me. I don't know whether I'll bring it to a standstill, but it's slowed right down, and I like it.
Do you want to give a closing remark?
A closing remark would be, a closing remark about age is really and truly there isn't any. We are immortal, eternal beings. So why do we play the aging game? Because science knows that it's an imprint in our brain, which means it's also an imprint in our consciousness. And when you let go of the whole idea of aging and associating a number with aging, then when you let go of that, things begin to change. And when you love yourself and can look in the mirror and love your body and know that you love the person you are, the being you are, everything changes.
Thank you, Michael. I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have too. And as always, you listeners, if you want to stay tuned, just hit the subscribe button, like the button, like the video, share the video, and see you in our next episode.
We have lots of wonderful things to discuss in the year ahead.
Yeah.
Much newness.
Thank you, Michael. See you soon.
Thank you, Sascha.